Smoke curled through the shattered corridors of the Duke's fortress. Sparks rained down from torn wires, and the faint hum of dying machines echoed like whispers in the dark. Jack coughed, pushing debris off his chest. His body ached, his left arm barely moved. But he was alive. He turned his head and saw Eris lying beside him, her silver skin now dim, her collar shattered into pieces. She was breathing. Barely. Jack dragged himself toward her, ignoring the pain tearing through his body. "Eris, hey, stay with me," he said in a rough voice. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly. "Did it work?" she asked weakly. Jack nodded. "Yeah, you did it." "The collars are gone," she smiled. Just a faint curve of her lips. "Then we won," she whispered. Before passing out again, he held her close, the entire chamber around them glowing with fading energy. Above them, through the cracks in the ceiling, the morning light of Valora 9 broke through the smoke, but peace didn't last long. The sound of marching boots filled the air, heavy and synchronized. Jack turned and saw armored figures emerging from the smoke. The Duke's private guards. Dozens of them, their armor black and gold, weapons drawn, and behind them came the Duke himself, unharmed, his scaled face twisted with fury. "You ruined years of work, human," he hissed, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "You freed my slaves, destroyed my machines, and for what? A creature you barely know." Jack stood slowly, his blaster heavy in his hand. "For something you'll never understand. Choice," he said. The Duke laughed, the sound cruel and deep. "Choice? You think she chose you? She was built to obey, born to kneel, and now you've broken her. I'll make you watch her die." He lifted his hand, his claws glowing with energy, but before he could strike, a sudden explosion shook the ground outside the fortress. Engines roared. Ships descended through the clouds, Syndicate ships, their insignia burning bright against the sky. The Syndicate had come, not to save Jack, but to collect. They had tracked his ship after all. Their leader, a sharp-faced woman in a black coat, stepped into the ruins with a dozen armed soldiers. "Duke Varen," she said coldly, "your debts to the Syndicate are overdue." The Duke turned, stunned. "You dare threaten me?" The Syndicate leader smiled. "We don't threaten. We collect," she snapped her fingers, and her soldiers opened fire. The fortress erupted into chaos. Guards fought guards, the Duke roared, slashing through Syndicate troops. Jack pulled Eris behind a fallen column, shielding her from the blasts. When the smoke cleared, only the Duke and Jack were left standing. Both bloodied, both furious, the Duke lunged. Claws slashing, Jack dodged, firing his last rounds. The shots tore into the Duke's chest, sparks and blood spilling together. But the alien didn't fall. He grabbed Jack by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "You can't kill a god," he snarled. Jack struggled, choking, then reached for the detonator still clipped to his belt. His voice rasped. "I don't need to kill a god," he whispered. "Just a monster." He pressed the button. The last of the charges they'd planted earlier exploded. Fire swallowed the Duke in a blinding flash. When the light faded, Jack lay on the ground, coughing. The Duke was gone. Nothing left but smoke and silence. The Syndicate ships were retreating, their mission complete outside. The city alarms had gone silent for the first time in decades. Jack crawled to Eris, lifting her gently. Her eyes opened. Golden and bright again, she smiled faintly. "You came to collect a debt," she said, voice trembling. "And instead, you gave me my life." Jack smiled back, exhausted but alive. "Guess we're even then." They stood together at the edge of the broken fortress, the morning light spilling across the skyline, the wind carrying the sound of freedom, faint, fragile, but real. Eris looked at him, her hand finding his. "Where will you go now?" she asked softly. Jack looked at the horizon, the endless stars above. "Anywhere that doesn't need collars," he said. As the sun rose over Valora 9, the human who came for a debt and the alien who found her freedom walked into the light, leaving behind the ashes of tyranny. The story of a quick stop had turned into a legend, one the galaxy would never forget. The story of what happened in the Duke's fortress spread across Valora 9 like wildfire. People whispered it in the markets, shouted it in the streets, and painted it across the walls in glowing colors. The Duke was dead, and the collars were gone for the first time in generations. The slaves of Valora 9 could breathe without fear. But while the city celebrated, Jack and Eris stayed hidden, far from the noise. They had taken shelter in an old cargo hangar at the edge of the desert zone, a place where the Syndicate rarely came and the Duke's old soldiers wouldn't dare to go. Jack sat near a broken console, fixing his blaster with slow, tired hands. The firelight flickered over his face, showing new scars and older regrets. Aris sat across from him, wrapped in a rough blanket, watching the embers dance. She looked stronger now, her color returning, the faint glow under her skin pulsing softly with every heartbeat. "They're free because of you," she said. Her voice quiet, Jack shook his head. "No, they're free because of you. You gave them the spark. I just pulled the trigger," she smiled gently. The kind of smile that made the ruined hangar feel less cold. "You could have left me there," she said. "You could have walked away," Jack met her eyes. "Yeah, but then I'd still be the same man I was before I met you." For a long time, they sat in silence, the wind whistling softly outside. Then Aris spoke again. "The Syndicate will come for us, you know that." "They don't like loose ends," Jack nodded. "I know. That's why we leave tonight." They gathered their few supplies and some rations, a small med kit, and the coordinates Jack had stolen from one of the Duke's terminals. It was a route to an uncharted system, far beyond the Syndicate's reach, a place the maps simply called the Outer Drift. Jack loaded the last of the fuel cells into the small cargo ship they'd repaired. The engines coughed weakly but came alive before they boarded. Aris turned to look at the distant glow of Valora 9, the city that had once been her prison. "Do you think they'll remember us?" she asked. Jack smiled faintly. "If they're smart, they won't. They'll build something better instead." She nodded, her eyes soft. "Then let's go build something of our own." As they lifted off, the engines roared against the wind. The hangar doors burst open, revealing the wide horizon. The storm clouds cleared just enough to show the stars, bright and endless. Aris stared out the window, her reflection glowing faintly in the glass. "Do all human worlds look like this?" she asked. Jack chuckled. "Some are uglier, some are worse, but maybe we'll find one worth calling home." Hours passed as they flew beyond the city's radar field, the blue glow of Valora 9 fading behind them. For the first time in his life, Jack didn't have a destination, no mission, no orders, no debts, just silence and the hum of the ship. He leaned back in his seat, glancing at Aris, who had finally fallen asleep, peaceful for once. But peace never lasted long for men like Jack. The radar beeped softly. A ship had entered their range, small and fast, too fast for a cargo vessel. Jack frowned, adjusting the controls. "Someone's tailing us," he muttered. Within seconds, the comm screen flickered on, revealing a masked Syndicate agent. Her voice cold. "Jack Rains, you owe us. And debts must be paid." Jack's jaw tightened. He looked at Aris, still sleeping, then at the screen. "Tell your bosses," he said, voice steady. "Some debts aren't worth collecting." He shut off the transmission and pushed the engines to full power. The stars streaked across the window as the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, leaving the pursuers behind in a blur of light. When the engines finally quieted, Aris stirred. "Where are we now?" she asked softly. Jack smiled. "Somewhere new," he said. "Somewhere free." Outside the window, a new world shimmered on the edge of the stars. Blue oceans, green lands untouched and waiting. Aris placed her hand over his. "Then let's start again," she whispered. Jack looked out at the horizon, the past burning behind them, the future wide open ahead. He smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said. "Let's start again." And the ship drifted toward the dawn of a new world, carrying with it the legend of a human who came for a debt and left with a revolution. The morning on Valora 9 never came quietly. The sky was a dull gray filled with drifting smog, and the city's neon glow fought to stay alive against the rising light. Jack and Aris had taken refuge in the lowest layer of the city, the underworld, a place where rules didn't exist and secrets had a price. The air was thick with smoke and whispers. Every corner hid someone who wanted to sell information, or a life. Jack led Aris through the narrow alleys, stepping over broken cables and discarded tech. The walls were covered in graffiti and flickering ads for cybernetic enhancements. "Welcome to the basement of paradise," Jack said dryly, trying to hide his fatigue. Aris walked beside him, her cloak pulled tight, her golden eyes dim from exhaustion. They stopped at a bar that looked like it had survived a war. Neon signs flickered above the entrance, and a giant lizard-like alien guarded the door. Jack nodded to him and slipped a few credits into his clawed hand inside. The music was low and the air smelled of burnt oil and cheap spice. At a corner table sat a small, hunched figure, an information broker named Tilo, his skin pale blue and covered with tiny metallic scales. Jack slid into the seat across from him, Eris sitting quietly at his side. "I need data on the Duke's neural network," Jack said. "And on this," he placed the collar on the table, the dull metal still carrying traces of Eris's energy. Tilo's eyes widened. "That's noble tech, human." "You shouldn't even be touching it," he whispered. Jack leaned forward, voice low. "I'm not asking what I should or shouldn't do. I'm asking how to destroy it." Tilo hesitated, then sighed. "The Duke's network is hidden deep inside his fortress. Every collar is linked to his life core. You kill the signal. You kill him, and maybe everyone connected to it." Jack sat back, the weight of those words settling heavy in his chest. Eris looked down at the collar. "If it means freedom for the others, it's worth it," she said softly. Tilo's metallic fingers tapped the table nervously. "You'll need help. The fortress is protected by an army of automatons and the city guard. I can point you to someone who might get you close, but it'll cost." Jack threw a handful of credits onto the table. "Just tell me where." Tilo nodded toward the back door. "Follow the red lights. And find a man named Kor." Jack froze for a moment. That name cut through him like a blade. "Kor?" he repeated. "He's one of the Duke's guards," Tilo smirked. He's been hiding down here since the Duke killed his brother. Now he's looking for revenge." They followed the narrow, red-lit tunnel until they reached a dim chamber. Kor was there, leaning against a pillar, his face half hidden by a hood. When he saw them, he smiled faintly. "You came back, human." "I told you to run." Jack's hand moved to his blaster. "You warned me, then you disappeared. Now you expect me to trust you." Kor spread his hands. "I'm not your enemy. I want the Duke to fall, and you're the only fool crazy enough to make it happen." Eris stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. "If you help us, I promise you'll see the Duke fall with your own eyes." For a long moment, Kor studied her, then nodded. "Fine, but if we do this, there's no turning back." He handed Jack a small map, lines glowing faintly on the surface. "This is the service route to the Duke's neural chamber. We get in, destroy the core, and free every slave bound to it." He paused, looking at Eris. "But once we start, his soldiers will hunt us until the end." Jack looked at Eris, then back at Kor. "We've been hunted since last night," he said quietly. "Let's finish what we started." Kor smiled grimly. "Then welcome to the rebellion," he said. The three of them stood in the dim light, surrounded by the hum of broken machines and the distant roar of the city above. For the first time, Jack felt like they had a plan. Fragile, dangerous, and possibly suicidal, but a plan nonetheless. The war for one woman's freedom was about to become a war for everyone still wearing a collar on Valora 9. The night air felt heavy, charged with a strange stillness before the storm. Jack stood beside Kor and Eris in an abandoned transit tunnel. The glow from the map flickered over their faces. The plan was simple: get into the Duke's fortress, reach the neural chamber, and destroy the core that controlled every slave collar on Valora 9. Simple on paper, impossible in reality. Jack checked his blaster, his heart beating like a drum inside his chest. Eris watched him quietly, her silver skin reflecting the faint lights from the tunnel ceiling. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. Jack shook his head. "I came this far, might as well finish the job." Kor snorted. "You humans always think you're heroes." Jack gave a half smile. "No, I just hate bullies." They moved through the tunnel, the sound of their boots echoing against the cold metal walls. The entrance to the fortress loomed ahead, a massive steel gate guarded by drones and soldiers. Kor pulled out a small device and pressed it against the control panel. Sparks danced, and the gate opened just wide enough for them to slip through. Inside, the fortress was alive with motion. Guards patrolled every hallway, machines hissed and clicked, and holograms of the Duke's face glared down from the walls. Eris shivered, remembering the years she had spent here. "I used to walk these halls every day," she whispered. "And I never felt the ground beneath my feet." Jack gave her a quick glance. "Then let's change what those halls mean." They moved quickly. Staying in the shadows, Kor led the way, using old access codes to bypass security doors. After an hour of creeping through the maze of corridors, they finally reached the core chamber. It was vast, a circular room filled with glowing cables that pulsed like veins. In the center floated a massive sphere of light and machinery, alive and humming. "That's it," Kor said quietly. "The Duke's life and the slave's chains all in one." Jack nodded. "Then let's cut it." They began setting up charges. But before Jack could finish arming the detonator, the lights flickered red, alarms screamed, and the Duke's voice boomed through the speakers. "You think you can steal from me, human? You think you can free my property?" Doors slammed open, soldiers poured in, their armor shining under the red lights. Core shouted, "They found us!" He fired into the crowd. Plasma bolts lighting up the air. Jack joined him, covering Eris as she worked desperately on the control terminal, trying to overload the core manually. Then it happened. Core turned suddenly and pointed his blaster at Jack. His eyes cold. "Sorry, human, deals change." Jack froze, betrayal slicing through him like a blade. "You sold us out," Core smirked. "The Duke offered me my freedom. I took it before Jack could move." Core fired. The blast hit Jack's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Eris screamed, rushing toward him. Core grabbed her by the arm, dragging her toward the Duke's guards. "She's mine now," he said. But before he could pull her away, the floor shook violently, a shockwave ripping through the chamber. Core stumbled, and Jack, bleeding and furious, raised his blaster and fired. The shot hit Core square in the chest, his body falling into the electric glow of the core. Jack pushed himself to his feet, pain burning through him. He looked at Eris, who was crying silently. "We're not done," he said, gripping his wound. Together they fought their way back to the terminal. Eris pressed her palm to the console. "I can shut it down," she said. "But I'll be connected to it. If it burns, so will I." Jack shook his head. "No. There's another way." She smiled weakly. "There never is." Before he could stop her, she closed her eyes and activated the sequence. Light burst around her. The core began to scream, energy pulsing like a heartbeat gone mad. Jack reached for her, shouting her name. But the blast threw him across the room. The last thing he saw was Eris standing in the middle of the storm, her hair of light swirling around her as the fortress exploded into fire. When Jack opened his eyes, the world was silent. The core was gone. The collars across the city had shattered, and Eris lay unconscious beside him. The cost of freedom had been paid in full, but the war wasn't over yet. Outside, the Duke still lived, and he was coming. Jack Rains never planned to stay long on Valora 9. He just wanted to collect one simple gambling debt and get back to his ship before midnight. The city looked like a dream made of lights, tall crystal towers glowing under a red sky. But Jack had seen too many dreams turn into traps. He kept his hand close to the blaster on his hip as his boots touched the glass floor of the landing platform. He had done many jobs for the Earth Syndicate, but this one was supposed to be easy. The target was a local noble called Duke Varen, a man known for his riches, cruelty, and terrible luck at cards. Jack's job was to collect what the Duke owed and leave quietly. No trouble, no attention. But the moment Jack stepped through the palace gates, something in the air told him this visit would not be quiet at all. Guards stood in perfect lines wearing black armor that hummed with electric power. Their alien eyes followed his every move. The walls shimmered with energy shields, and the sound of laughter echoed through the corridors. Not warm laughter, but the kind that made the skin crawl. Jack forced a grin and handed over his holo badge, saying he had come to speak about a financial matter. The guards let him in, though their faces showed confusion. Humans rarely walked into the Duke's home and walked out again. Inside, the palace smelled of strange perfumes, flowers that glowed in the dark, and smoke from silver incense that made the air heavy. Musicians played soft notes on crystal strings, and servants bowed as the Duke appeared on a high platform. He was tall, broad, and covered in golden scales that caught every bit of light. He smiled with too many teeth. "Ah, a human collector," the Duke said in a voice that rumbled like thunder. "Your kind is brave or very foolish." Jack kept his tone calm. He had met worse men before. He explained the debt, the numbers, the late payments, and waited, but the Duke only laughed, throwing a handful of shining coins at Jack's feet. "There, human, take your payment in scraps. It's more than your planet deserves." The hall filled with laughter again, but Jack didn't bend down. He just stared, cold and silent. That silence made the Duke frown. Then Jack saw her standing behind the throne, still and quiet like a statue. She was unlike any creature he had seen, her skin silver with soft light running through it, eyes golden like molten stars. She wore a collar that glowed faintly around her neck. Every time the Duke moved too close, she flinched. Jack caught the movement, small but sharp, the kind that spoke of pain, not fear. Their eyes met for a moment, and something in that look hit Jack harder than any gunshot. She wasn't the Duke's wife by choice. She was a prisoner wrapped in silk, trapped behind a smile she didn't mean. The Duke called her Lady Eris, voice full of ownership. Jack nodded politely, but inside, A storm started to grow. He finished the meeting, accepted a promise that the debt would be paid soon, and turned to leave, his mind racing as he walked through the hallway. One of the guards brushed past him and whispered in a low voice, "Leave before the lights go out." Jack froze, but didn't turn around. He walked straight to the exit, heart pounding. Outside, the night wind hit his face cool and sharp. He looked back at the glowing palace, and for the first time in years, he felt something more than duty. It was anger mixed with something else, a spark of pity, maybe even something dangerous like compassion. He climbed into his ship, but as he reached for the control panel, something clinked on the metal floor, a small silver chip. He didn't remember having it before. He picked it up, turned it over, and saw a faint mark, the same gold color as the woman's eyes. Jack leaned back in his seat, staring at the palace lights fading behind the fog. His job was supposed to be over, but deep down, he already knew he would return. He came for money, but he had found something far more valuable, a secret he couldn't ignore, and a woman who didn't belong in chains. The quick stop had just become a dangerous beginning. Jack didn't sleep that night. His mind replayed the scene again and again. The Duke's cruel smile, the golden eyes of Lady Eris, and that strange silver chip she had somehow slipped into his hand. Outside, the rain painted streaks of blue light across his ship's window. The city of Valora 9 never slept. Its towers blinking like watchful eyes. Jack sat at his desk, running the chip through his old military decoder. The device flickered, and then a voice came out. Soft and broken, it was her voice. "My name is Eris. I don't have much time. If you're hearing this, I need your help. They will erase me at dawn." The message cut off with a static crack. Jack froze. She wasn't just scared, she was desperate. The word erase wasn't a figure of speech. He had heard it before during the old wars. It meant total mind wipe. He leaned back, thinking he could just leave, fly off and forget this whole mess. It wasn't his problem. He had done his job. The syndicate only paid for debts, not rescues. But something about her voice didn't let him rest. He remembered the way she flinched at the Duke's hand, the pain behind those glowing eyes. The next morning, Jack walked into the lower markets, hoping to find information about the Duke's collar tech. He met an old alien engineer, one who used to build the control devices for nobles. The old man looked at the chip and frowned. "This is old slave code. It's not supposed to exist anymore. Her collar is linked to the Duke's life core. If she dies, he feels it. If he dies, she dies." Jack felt a cold wave run through him. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was a living chain. The Duke had made sure of it. He thanked the man, slipped him some credits, and walked back through the crowded streets. The rain started again, heavy and silver. As he neared the spaceport, someone stepped out from the shadows. It was Kor, the same guard who had whispered to him in the palace. His voice was low. "You should not have come back, human. The Duke knows you took something. He's angry. Very angry." Jack tensed, ready to draw his weapon, but Kor raised his hand slowly. "I don't want to fight. I just want to tell you she's still alive. For now." Then he disappeared into the mist before Jack could ask more. Back in his ship, Jack sat staring at the glowing chip. Her voice echoed in his ears again. "Help me, or I'll be erased." He opened a communication line to the syndicate, but before he could speak, he stopped himself. They would never approve this. They'd call it personal interference, maybe even punish him for it. Jack stood, grabbed his old revolver, and loaded it, one bullet at a time. His reflection stared back at him in the mirror. Tired eyes, graying hair, scars from too many jobs gone wrong. "Just one more mistake," he muttered. "One more good mistake." He shut down the ship's tracking system, took off his syndicate badge, and slipped the chip into his pocket. His decision was made. He wasn't leaving Valora 9 without her. As night fell again, he moved through the city like a ghost. Blending into the crowd, he reached the edge of the palace walls and saw the lights flicker. Thunder rolled over the horizon. It felt like the world was holding its breath. In that stormy silence, Jack whispered to himself, "I came to collect a debt, but now I owe her something far greater." He pulled up his hood, stepped into the shadows, and disappeared toward the palace gates. The night had only one direction, straight into danger. Straight toward her, and this time he wasn't turning back. The storm rolled across Valora 9 like a living creature, its silver lightning cutting through the dark clouds. Jack watched from the rooftop of an old tower, his coat flapping in the wind. The palace glowed far in the distance like a jewel made of poison. Somewhere inside that light was Lady Eris, and every second he wasted brought her closer to being erased. Jack checked his gear, a blaster at his hip. an old pulse knife strapped to his boot, and a small jammer he had bought in the black market to disrupt security fields. He wasn't a hero, never had been, but tonight he couldn't pretend to be just a collector. The thought of her chained, scared, and waiting for death burned through his chest like fire. He made his way down the tower, moving through the neon rain, blending with the crowd. The air was thick with smoke and alien music. Drones floated overhead, flashing warnings about curfews and surveillance. Jack stayed in the shadows until he reached a tunnel that led under the palace walls, the same route the servants used to deliver supplies. Inside, the smell of oil and damp stone filled the air. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing like a slow heartbeat. Jack moved quietly, avoiding the cameras. He reached a side door that opened into the lower corridors of the palace, and there, he saw something that froze him. 3 guards lying unconscious, and a trail of golden liquid. Not blood, something glowing. He followed the trail, gun ready, until a voice whispered from the dark. "You shouldn't have come back," it was Eris. Her silver skin faintly lit in the gloom, her collar blinking weakly. She looked weaker, thinner, her hands trembling. "They'll kill you if they find you," she said. But her voice cracked halfway. Jack stepped closer, his eyes soft. "Not if I kill them first," he said quietly. She shook her head, trying to smile. "You humans, always thinking everything can be solved with bullets." He handed her a cloak to cover herself and guided her through the tunnels. Every sound made them jump. The hum of the palace's reactors, the echo of boots on metal floors. When they reached a junction, she stopped, pointing at a small control box on the wall. "My collar, it's linked here if you destroy it." "I can't be tracked," Jack knelt, pulled out his tools and started to work. The wires were alien, glowing like veins of light. He'd only seen such tech once before, during the Battle of Tal Saris, when entire cities were burned because of slave control networks. "This thing's tied to the Duke's life," he murmured. "If I break it wrong, it'll fry your brain." Eris looked at him, calm despite her fear. "Then don't break it wrong." Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. Finally, with a spark and a hiss, the collar powered down, its light fading to black. She gasped softly, touching her neck. "It's gone," she whispered. Tears shining in her golden eyes, Jack smiled. But before he could say anything, alarms exploded across the tunnels. Red lights flashing everywhere. "Move!" Jack shouted, grabbing her hand. They ran through the smoke and fire, the corridor behind them filling with armored guards. Blasters firing bright streams of plasma. Jack fired back, covering their escape. The smell of burning metal filled the air. They reached an old maintenance hatch and climbed out into the open rain. Above them, the sky blazed with ships. The Duke's personal guard was already hunting. Eris clutched Jack's arm. "You shouldn't have done this for me," she said breathlessly. "You don't even know me." Jack looked at her, lightning flashing across his face. "I know what chains look like," he said, "and I've spent my life breaking them." They disappeared into the storm, 2 fugitives against a world built on power. The palace behind them burned with the sound of alarms, and far above, the Duke's voice echoed through the city speakers, cold and furious. "Find them both, dead or alive." The rain hammered down on the glass roofs of Valora 9 as Jack and Eris raced through the winding alleys, their footsteps splashing through puddles that reflected the flashing neon lights above. The night felt alive with danger. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning for movement, and somewhere behind them, the Duke's guards shouted orders, their metallic voices echoing through the storm. Jack pulled Eris behind a stack of cargo crates, his breath heavy, his jacket soaked. He checked his blaster. Only 2 charges left. "We can't keep running forever," he muttered. Eris's golden eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "Then we don't run," she whispered. "We hide." She led him down a narrow passage that twisted behind the city's lower markets. Glowing signs flickered around them in languages Jack couldn't read. They entered an old transport depot, abandoned and silent. The air smelled like rust and old oil. Eris pressed her palm to a hidden panel on the wall, and a door slid open, revealing a dim underground tunnel filled with dust and broken machines. "How do you know this place?" Jack asked, keeping his blaster ready. She glanced back at him. "Because this used to be mine," she said quietly. "Before the Duke bought everything, and including me." Her voice cracked on the last words. Jack didn't answer. He just followed, feeling the weight of her story hang heavy between them. They found a small service hovercraft tucked behind a pile of metal debris. Jack quickly checked the controls. Most systems were offline, but the engine still hummed weakly. "It'll have to do," he said. He climbed into the pilot seat while Eris sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly. The hovercraft lifted off the ground with a low hum, rising through a vent that opened into the misty sky. As they flew low over the city, the wind tore at their clothes. Lights from the floating towers reflected off the rain. It would have been beautiful if not for the warships appearing on the radar. "We've got company," Jack said, tilting the craft sharply as laser fire sliced through the night. Bright blue streaks flashing past them. Eris gripped the seat, her voice shaking. "They're using trackers, we can't outfly them." Jack swore under his breath and dived between two skyscrapers. "Engines roaring, then we don't outfly them," he said. "We outthink them." He sent the hovercraft skimming dangerously close to a transport lane, hiding among dozens of delivery drones. The enemy fire slowed, confused by the sudden clutter. One of the pursuing ships crashed into a drone cluster and exploded in a burst of light. The explosion threw them off balance. The hovercraft spun wildly. Alarm screamed. Jack struggled with the controls. "Hold on," he shouted. The craft slammed into a landing platform. Sparks flying, they crashed hard but stayed alive. Smoke filled the air as Jack kicked open the door and helped Eris out. They stumbled through the smoke toward a nearby maintenance tower. Sirens blaring all around, Eris coughed, clutching her chest. "We can't keep this up," she said. Jack nodded, his face grim. "We just need one safe place. One quiet hour to think." They found a dark corner under the tower's broken framework. Hidden from view, Jack patched the wound on her arm with a strip from his coat. His hands rough but gentle. For a long moment neither spoke. The city hummed above them like a giant machine that never stopped. Finally Eris looked up, her eyes wet but steady. "Why are you doing this, human?" "You could have left me to die." Jack hesitated, then said softly, "Because I've seen too many good people turned into property. Because someone once saved me when they didn't have to." A faint smile touched her lips. "Then maybe this world still has hope," she whispered before Jack could answer. A metallic voice echoed through the storm. "Target detected." "Sector 12." Searchlights flared across the tower walls. The Duke's hunters were closing in again. Jack gripped his blaster, eyes narrowing. "Hope will have to wait," he said, pulling her close as they slipped into the shadows, ready to fight their way through another night of fire and fear.